Welcome to the Radiantpreneur Rising Show with me, Jess Tomlinson. Interviews to inspire a new movement of leaders and entrepreneurs. The ones who lead with vulnerability and authenticity, stand in visibility, allowing themselves to truly be seen, are fierce and playful and sexy. Choose business as a spiritual practice. Seek collaboration versus competition. No, giving back is not an option. It's a necessity. They do it their way. They radiate. They rise. Now, let's rise together. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you are here. I am Jess Tomlinson, and this is the Radiantpreneur Rising Show, episode number 6. I am so stoked that you are here today because you're in for a really special treat. Today I have the beautiful, amazing woman, Shannon Ray. I don't know why I felt like I needed to say woman, but apparently that's really important. We were just talking about, some womanly stuff before we got on. And just so excited to introduce you to this amazing woman who's doing really important work in the world. And I know that because we've been on this journey for about a year and 3 months or so together. And I've been mentoring her, and she is just a dear friend and soul sister. And we're just going to dive right in. So Shannon Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the show with you. And I love the name of it. Like, you just embody so much of that. And that's what makes you an inspiration in the work that you're doing. So I'm honored to be a part of this process with you.
Thank you. I was definitely loving the show name the other day. I'm like, yeah, that is really good. And all the people who've been coming on, including you, it's like, that's really, I feel like how we name something is so important, right? Like, because that's the energy we start from. So thank you for noticing that and being willing to step into it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Yay. So for you guys to get to know Shannon, I'll start with the only question that I ask every guest at the beginning, which is, how are you leaning into your visibility edges right now?
Well, you certainly have been along for this crazy journey that I've been on with visibility over this past year plus. So I would say currently what I'm doing, so as you know, we just finished my brand video, which is getting ready to launch very soon here. So I'm super excited about that. And I'd say that is definitely like my edge, right? Like, that's one of the biggest things you can do is put together a brand video like this. And I really spoke from my heart. And I know there's pieces within that brand video where I'm like, wow, did I just say that? And did I say that publicly? Like, I claimed it. And I think at the time it was easier for me to claim it because I knew that it would probably be, a little while before the video actually came out. And so now it's like down to the wire, like, okay, it's ready to, put this out in the world. So I'd say right now that that's one big thing. I know that's going to be a huge step for me, visibility wise. And another way that's happening too is just getting more comfortable with putting my voice more out there on social media, for example, or like in the work that we've done together, you've encouraged me a lot to do videos when I send out messages, to my community and on social media. And it's funny. It's this strange, like, I have this resistance sometimes to doing these videos, but then once I do it, it feels really good. And I look at it and I go, yeah, that's me. Like, this feels good. This feels right. And I think sometimes the challenge for me is, when you put something out there and then there are times when you get a lot of feedback on it and great feedback. And then sometimes there's crickets. And so that can make it a little scarier. Like, I think sometimes we fear getting negative feedback, but then sometimes getting the no feedback is sometimes just as scary. So it's being able to just keep doing it and practice that and trusting that those that need to hear the message are going to hear it. And it's more important to be visible and to be out there for those that need to hear the message than it is to worry about, you know, your own little fears and things that get in the way. So that's where I'm really leaning into those edges right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you shared that. And um, just like you said a couple of things that I think really hit home. The first part about like actually claiming certain things in videos, you know, like when we did your brand video, like I know I kind of like pushed and nudged you to like say a few things. So I'm actually kind of curious. Maybe we can just start there. Like, what were some of those things that you're a little bit hesitant to share? um, you know, and why? Like, I'm curious, and I think it'll be really helpful for people to hear your own journey. You know, I think a lot of times one of the struggles that I know a lot of people run up against when I'm talking to them about doing a brand video is like, oh my God, it's going to be so permanent. So I'm curious if that's one of your things. And then, yeah, just share a little bit about like, what were those specific things you said, and why did it feel a little bit edgy to say those on a brand video?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly now. I'm like, what did I say exactly? It's more the feeling.
Like,
so, yeah, I know you probably know. So it's part of the journey for me, and pushing those visibility edges has been making this huge shift of this 20-year corporate life that I've been living, and now stepping into something that like my business is me. You know, my business is no longer someone else's product. And, you know, it's one thing to get out there and sell or pitch a product that's not yours, or to train about, you know, a software product, you know, which is my background in recruitment. And now I'm my product. So going out there and saying that, you know, your corporate job doesn't have to define you. Like, there can be more out there. So there's one thing in that video we talked about, perhaps you want to get out of Cubicle Nation, right?
Yeah.
And you know, that was pushing my edges by saying that, because that's not for everyone, right? That's not every woman that I support. Not everyone's looking to get out of their corporate job, but a lot of them are. A lot of them have these dreams of like these businesses they've been wanting to start, or some sort of passion project, or they're just, you know, burnt out in the work that they're doing, or they want more freedom. A lot of them want freedom, which is one of my number one values, and why a big part of my why and what I'm in the work that I'm doing too. So I'd say that was one thing, is that was a very bold claim, or felt to me like a bold claim, because in a way it's been a shift of going from this, you know, having some sort of like allegiance, right, to a corporate job, or some sort of dedication to that life. And I think that's how a lot of people feel when they're working in a full-time regular job. So to share a piece of you that feels like it could potentially go against like what that whole corporate message is, or that kind of allegiance to a company, that's edgy, right? That feels a little risky. So that was a big part for me. And then the other part too was also, it's funny because I believe this wholeheartedly, but talking about going after and going after an extraordinary life, like really claiming that, because I'm already claiming that. I have been claiming that. I claimed that as soon as I decided to start my own business, but I feel like I'm also still claiming that. Like, I'm still pulling back all the layers on what an extraordinary life looks like for me too, and then helping women build that. So it's in that one, I think I'm having a harder time putting words around like why that is a little bit more edgy, but it is a very big, bold statement, because in some ways it means forget everything you learned, forget about all those belief systems that are holding you back. Actually, this is what's true. And sometimes that rocks the boat.
Yeah. I love that, because I think at least for me, like claiming something like that, you know, like I love to use big, bold statements. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh my God, that was like really like pie in the sky, huge, like dramatic. And I will sometimes criticize myself and be like, why are you so like, you know, like all these big grandiose statements, you know? And and I probably feel like that, I'm guessing now, actually just realizing, because other people have poo-pooed me and my like, grandiose visions and optimism and like, possibility mindset, like I can do anything. And I know also for me, when I've claimed stuff like that in videos, it's like also claiming it for myself. And sometimes I don't feel like I'm living, that extraordinary life. And I'm like, oh my God, so, like you mentioned, it's like we are on the path consistently, and like I hope that I never stop like growing and learning. And yet claiming something like that, especially maybe, the video day comes and you're like not feeling so awesome. I don't know. Like I've definitely been there so many times. Yeah. You can't exactly plan specifically. Like you can like set yourself up for like, self-care and set yourself up with the mindset necessary to like go in to do a video. But it's like sometimes life just happens and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm saying this big statement and I don't really feel like it today, even though it's true. And I know that you have an extraordinary life, And so I don't know, that's at least for me. Like, so I wonder if there's a little bit of that in there that you experienced too, going into that process.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your vulnerability around that too. Like it doesn't always feel extraordinary, right? And I think that you hear a lot about imposter syndrome, and I think there's a perception, I think especially as coaches, that there's a pressure we put on ourselves to like be living this perfect life, and it has to always be like on the up and positive and upbeat, and we don't have the lows because we're helping people through their own lows, right? We're helping people reach that next level. And I think that's part of what makes us great coaches too. It's because we're always pushing for like that next thing. Like we're always wanting to grow. Like, how can I do it better? Like, what's the next level? But the other side of that is being hard on yourself. And that's the interesting thing I've noticed in the women that I work with, is that they're often very hard on themselves because they're high achievers and or they're perfectionists, or they really want to please everybody, right? And when you throw all of that into the mix, that's a recipe for disaster and not having a fulfilled life, right? And so it's about part of it too in making a claim. I think like living an extraordinary life is letting yourself bring in like the dark and the light. Right? An extraordinary life doesn't mean you're not experiencing any of the dark or low moments. It's all of it, and it's all beautiful.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. So I'd love for you to share just a little bit more about how you were able to claim like the Cubicle Nation thing. I know that was totally an edge for you. And I was a little bit like pokey, like, come on, just say it, Shannon. Like, and so I'd love to just hear, like, how were you able to claim that? And how would you encourage other women that are maybe struggling to say something bold because they're afraid of, turning people off?
Yeah. So I would say it was honestly a big part of it was having that conversation with you around this. Like, but isn't this true? Like, isn't this how I really feel? So there was that, this is a bold statement. It's a little bit edgy, but at the same time, it's true. So why kind of muffle that voice that needs to come out, because it's the truth, and it's not going to feel good to tone it down or to water it down, right? Yeah. So it's better to take that leap and step out of that comfort zone. And there might be some negative feedback based on that, right? It's not going to be received well by everyone, but those that needed to hear it are going to be like, oh, thank God. Like, this is permission to be who I am, permission to have what I want. And I'd say the other part of it for me too is that's what was true for me. And I know how amazing it feels because it's like escaping Cubicle Nation for me is not just leaving corporate altogether, it's doing it your own way. And that's what I'm doing too. So, I have my coaching business, and I'm also doing freelance work in software, and that works well for me. So, that to me is escaping Cubicle Nation. I don't have to be in a cubicle. I get to work from my home office. I get to work in a cafe. I get to be on the road, meeting with clients, and that to me is fun. That's being out of Cubicle Nation. But, I'm still supporting, my clients in the corporate world also. And that all feels good. It all feels good. So I think it was just standing behind the truth of knowing like, this is true. This is really what I feel, even though there might be a little bit of discomfort with like claiming it out loud.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because it's like, this is true, and this is true for you specifically. Because if I remember, it was one of our coaching calls that you actually said that. So I was just reflecting what you had already said. It's not like I was saying, Shannon, you need to like talk about cubicle and like, because I know me and you both share that corporate background, and we actually both liked a lot of the aspects. We did very well in corporate, and we're not, well, at least I don't think I've ever heard you talk about the job. Maybe you have, but for me, like, I know I don't like when people like poo-poo the job, because I'm like, that works for some people, like, and I think one thing that you said, so I love that you're like, it was my truth, so you had to like get really honest with yourself, and then realizing that your truth also gives other people permission to admit their own truth. And then I think that the other part around that I think is so important, that so many leaders that want to be more visible and really like step into their voice forget, is that two things can be true at the same time. And so you can say like, and I think we said this specifically on your video, like the way we crafted the script, right? It was like, whether you want to climb the corporate ladder or you're just tired and want to get out of cubicle nation. So it's like, both can be true, right? Like, what you're actually helping them create is that more fulfilling career, whatever that looks like for them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I just really wanted to point that out, because I think so many times, like when we talk about, building our businesses or our message, it's like we get so extreme that it's like this or nothing. And it's like, we're like such complex human beings, like you can actually help somebody who falls into both of these categories, because that's what you believe. And yet the similar thing is that you're helping them with this overarching journey, which is a fulfilling career that like lights them up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The world is full of dichotomies. Like you said, we are truly complex, and it's not always so black and white. If anything, we live a lot in the gray. So, learning, the more we embrace that and welcome that, and not try to fit into a certain box or categorize certain things, or has to be this way, or it's this or that. And I know this is one thing that you've encouraged me or reminded me also a lot about, is it's an and. What about this and that? It doesn't have to be this or that. And that's where a lot of the women that I work with are at as well. So it's about, I don't totally love the job that I do, but I also have this other thing that I want to do. So it's about, okay, how can it be both? How can you have the job that's a bridge to get you where you want to go, and also be focusing on what your passion is, whether that ends up paying the bills or not?
Yeah. I love this. And I want to talk a little bit more about like your choice, at least right now, right, to like do contract work and have your business, and just like some of the shame that's like out there around doing kind of both, and then also how that's impacted your messaging. Because I know, if you're willing to go there, that was like a big topic, like on one of our calls, right? Is like that fear around like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing this thing, but then I also want to like, make sure I'm like okay over here, like on the consulting side. So how have you been like kind of integrating both of these sides of your life? I know you've been stepping into a lot more of like your spirituality and what that means, and like the realm of the work that you do, both working for other companies and working with your private clients. I'd love you to just jam on that a little bit if you're willing.
Yeah. And I'll say, as you know, I'm still wading through it. Like, I'm still sorting that all out and how that comes together. But the further along, I know, right? It's always a process. And then we're constantly like permission to reinvent, like start going in one direction, and wait a minute, that's not working for me. So I'm going to go in this other direction, and that's totally okay too. And I think that is part of it. You feel like you're claiming something, so therefore I can't do something that shakes that up. Like I'm claiming that, you know, I'm doing this business that is my passion and is my fulfilling work on my own terms. And it was, yeah, it kind of going back into that, like, it doesn't have to be an or, it can be an and. And so I'd say this is an area where, you know, you and I talked a lot about too, is, you know, say from a corporate perspective, a corporate client perspective, that the more I'm me, and this goes from like whoever you are meant to attract into your life as a client, whether it's coaching client, corporate client, whatever that might look like, the more you're you, the more you're going to attract those people that like love that love that about you. So if you are playing small or hiding who you are, then that may get you in situations where it's not going to be in alignment with who you are. And this has been a big lesson for me, and what I'm learning through this whole process is how to stay in alignment with who I am. And it's okay that some people are going to be turned off by what I have to say, you know, by what my voice is out there in the world. So if a corporate client is turned off by that, then that's okay. There's going to be another one that's not. And so I got to a point where if I ended up having a personal conversation with one of my corporate clients, like, oh, hey, by the way, like, you know, they ask me what I do or what my life is like. And I say, oh yeah, I have this coaching business too. And I happen to work with a lot of women in the work that I do, because a lot of them are in the world of recruiting. They get super curious about it. And it actually starts to light them up. They're like, oh, that's really cool, like what you're doing. And a lot of it is because they have this dream, you know, to do something beyond what they're doing in their day-to-day job. So I'm trying to like feel like, am I answering this question? Am I coming full circle on this? But knowing that the more that I'm just true to who I am, the more that that's attractive to other people, and those that need to hear it will hear it. And so the rest falls off, and that's okay. So I'd say a big part of it is trusting that if someone is turned off by that part of, you know, of me or who I am, then it's not a fit for me anyway. So that it's trusting, you know, one of my favorite sayings that I've been leaning on a lot lately is this or something better. So if it's not this, then, ooh, let's get excited because there's something better coming along. Like I'm going to wait for that something better.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. And when's kind of like a time that you felt like that was really important to lean into the this or something better?
So many times. My goodness.
A specific moment that you feel like would be powerful to share?
Yeah, let me think about that. I would say, so like in the freelance work that I've been doing, you know, I've had some really exciting opportunities come my way, and for one reason or another, it doesn't work out. And that might be because my schedule is restrictive, because I'm setting aside a certain amount of time for my business, right? Because that is going to continue just growing. And so I've had to say no to some really great opportunities because of that. And so it's that trust of, okay, so this was a great opportunity and I had to say no to it, but I'm trusting, you know, that there is something better that's going to be more in alignment for me too.
Yeah. That's so good. Trust is such a huge topic. I feel like personally, everything comes down to trust. Like I'm feeling a lot more lately called to really talk more about business as a spiritual path, because it is like for me, and you know this about my journey, but you know, losing friends, you know, my best friend dying, then a second friend dying, and like before that leaving Las Vegas from a flood, and like being in a new place, and then like, you know, struggling with, oh my God, how do I run my business? Like, first of all, I don't know anybody, and second of all, like, you know, I'm going through all this grief. And that really took like a huge hit for me. It's like, you know, I know that I'm not alone in like life things that happen, right? And so I feel like this is such a huge conversation for business owners, when like literally the thing that matters most, I believe, for us as business owners, growing and evolving is to do that inner work first. Like so many of us, know like the things that we're supposed to be doing, but what we have a hard time is like remembering, is like, what's right for me? How do I trust myself? How do I show the best me possible? Because without any of that, like all the stuff that we know, logically is not going to matter. Like, at least that's what happened with me, when I like couldn't function after my friend died. It was like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I like feel like shit, So yeah, I love that you said trust, because I just wanted to bring that connection to like this business as a spiritual path. And like, that there are going to be extreme ups and there are going to be extreme downs, like even for like the multimillionaires that are out there, of us. So I'm curious, like, do you have any thoughts on that, like trust related to kind of business as a spiritual path, or what business as a spiritual path means to you?
Yeah. And I was just thinking like that spiritual path is, right, as you know, it's ongoing and it will be forever.
Right.
Yeah. When I look back at, this time that when I decided to start my own business, there's so much to it that feels so different than the work that I was doing in a corporate job. Like that world to me feels so different. And I have moments of like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is amazing to be on this journey. And I'm so grateful, whatever the trade-off has been, the constantly pushing your edges and constantly having to step out of your comfort zone and really having to dig deep and figure out like, what is that authentic voice that needs to come through, and how can I be of best service to those that I'm here to serve? So that, just saying that, like, it's easy to say, but there's so much that goes into actually doing that work, right? Like, I think that, I had a realization the other day, when you think about like, how do I talk about myself when I talk about who I am and where I've been? And like, I've been studying spirituality and human potential for like over 20 years. And it was something that I just took for granted because it's something I couldn't not do. It was something I felt compelled to do. And now in my business, and as I try to pull in some of the more spiritual pieces into the work that I do with women, I think there was no mistake that I've always felt compelled to just dig deeper and what else is possible. And how can I find even more freedom in life, right? Like freedom, not in terms of just time, but like freedom in terms of emotional freedom. And really just, I see it as permission to be who you are and have what you want in this lifetime, really is what it comes down to. I think that's a big part of what the spiritual journey comes down to, is discovering who you really are. Like, what's the truth of you, and whether or not you believe that has some bigger connection or connection to, however you define your spirituality. It's, it's slightly different for everyone. So I find that the women that are drawn to me are often very spiritual. And so part of my spiritual journey has been like, no, they want this from me. Like, this actually serves them, the more that I can share this with them. So,
which is so hard sometimes when you come from like a corporate background where like, right. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just like, oh my God, I remember when I really started to own like my spirituality in corporate, it was like that time frame where I started to like really get into my business on the side and like started to like not give a fuck like how people perceive me in corporate, because I'm like, well, if I get fired, I'll just have more time to spend on my business. And I gave myself, it was so scary, but I gave myself permission to like treat it as an experiment of like, I wonder what would happen if I just started talking about like these kind of concepts. And I remember being like in a manager's meeting, actually it was an interview for me to like become a manager, because I was like a coordinator and it was a management position that they were promoting me into, and it was all the managers, and they asked me what my favorite book was. And I remember just blurting out of my mouth like what I was reading in that moment. And honestly, I don't even remember like what it was in that moment, but I probably said one of my favorite books, because it's true, is The Power of Now. That was like totally shifted my perception. Like, I had a huge opening when I read that. And I remember also mentioning like I don't know, something else. And what happened was so cool because afterwards, all the managers came like one by one up to my desk and started to like ask me like, "Oh, do you follow Tony Robbins?" And like, "Do you do this?" And like they started
Ah,
to like start coming to me to have these kind of like personal development, self-help conversations on the side. And it was so interesting what started to happen. Like, so yeah, I just still think back to that and I'm like, oh yeah, that was so cool because that was a gift not only for like me to like just share and be so open, but for them as well. I felt like because then they felt like, oh, I can talk to Jess about this stuff.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like had you not shared that in the meeting, like they wouldn't know. Like it would have been just business as usual and they wouldn't have seen this part of you. But for some reason we feel this need to hide that, which is really, and I think that's just, that's culture, that's society, that's the way that the corporate world looks today. You know, people think they have to hide these parts of themselves. Not. So I love that you took that opportunity and then saw the benefit of people wanting to connect with you on that level.
yeah, it was just so, it's so interesting because to your point around just, you know, they want this from me. I think that that is so so important for all of us to remember if spirituality is like your path, you know, and you believe that you're put here to share more of that side of yourself. Um, yeah, I would just say like it's such a thing for people to push down because we feel like, oh no, they just want, you know, the practical stuff. But
Yeah.
for you know, from my perspective, it's like, well, this is part of the practical stuff. And so, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, like the practicality? And like, I'm also curious, like, how do you weave in your spirituality into your work that you do?
Yeah, really good question because I'm still learning how to weave that in. So one thing that I've done, well, I'll first start with this. I would say that a lot of just, it's funny because there's a lot of beliefs, let's say in Buddhism, that are just like wise words in life, right? So some people would call that spirituality, and other people would just call that wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. This makes life so much easier when I look at it this way. And so I'd say that's one way that I incorporate spirituality is just in like day-to-day belief systems, you know, believing in being more empowered, that we're more powerful than we believe we are, right?
Yeah.
And some people could call that a spiritual belief, right? Because part of that for me in believing I'm more powerful than maybe on some days who I think I am, that is leaning on some sort of higher power also. Like that is what pulls me forward. That is what gives me that strength sometimes. So it's, I'd say that the way that I work with this when I'm working with clients is to, because I would never, you know, put my own spiritual beliefs on someone. That's one of the questions I ask in my initial questionnaire when I start working with a client is,
Mm.
do you believe in a higher power? Because it's helpful for me to understand like where they are. And
That's good. I like that.
yeah, it's super helpful because if they say no, then I know that there are certain things that just aren't going to land well with them. I've never
Mhm.
had a no, by the way, and I don't think I ever will because that's not just typically who I draw in, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
but it, you know, sometimes they'll give me an explanation about what their beliefs are, and it's always super, super helpful for me. So, I'd say it's more like it's not just like the client goes, oh, okay, here's the spiritual part, right? It's more just words of wisdom that have been around for thousands of years, right? And these are things
Yeah.
that have been written about for thousands of years. And it's just how we approach life and what we believe about ourselves. So I'd say that is more the general, like overall, how I incorporate it. But if a client is open to it, you know, I've had one client where we've played with numerology, and
Yeah.
sometimes I just bring something up and then I can see that a light goes on. I'm like, oh, would you like me to like run your numbers for you? And we can look at your life path and your current year. And they're like, yeah, I want to see that. So that is fun for me to do, to dive into that work. So there's so many tools like that that I have. This is all part of that 20 years of what I've been studying in spirituality and human potential. So
Mhm.
I feel like I have this huge toolkit, and it's going to be different with every client. So some clients are going to be more open to certain tools than others. And so a part of that for me is leaning on my own intuition, which is something that I teach my clients too. I don't always call it intuition, but it's just that inner knowing, like what does your heart say? Like, what does your gut say? I'd say those are the primary ways that I incorporate that spirituality into my work.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. I want to talk about that topic of intuition and really how are you using it right now, your intuition, to kind of guide you to kind of next steps of where you're going. I know we've had like a huge like growth spurt together of our work together, and now you're kind of like in this new level of reassessing all the amazing things that you've done. Like you've had several private clients, you have done so many workshops and talks, and you led your first group program, which was so amazing. So I'm curious, like, do you want to share a little bit about like maybe how your intuition has guided you through everything that you've done this past year, and also where it's taking you moving forward?
Yeah. So for my intuition, it's first like sifting through like those little voices that come up, like the fears. So I think a big part of it is understanding when I'm thinking that, oh, I want to do this or I don't want to do this. Like, is that fear speaking or is that my intuition? I think this can be sometimes the hardest part. So for me, it's about allowing for that quiet space to like really tune in, and maybe even like write. I'm a huge proponent of writing things down also. So whether that's through journaling or just writing something down that you're going to burn in the fireplace, but you just had to get it out on paper. So I would say it's the way that I lean on my own intuition is usually I know, like they talk about, don't second guess yourself, because that second guess is not usually the right answer. It was that first kind of intuitive hit that you got about something. So it's the things that start to repeat themselves. Like I feel like, like networking and getting out there more. It's so funny because a lot of people don't like networking, but it's something I actually enjoy. Yeah. But, and so I've been feeling a pull to be out there more in the world and doing more networking and connecting with people. And that is where I shine. That's where connections start to really happen for me. And so it won't feel good if I continue to ignore that. So it's about that trusting those little messages that come to you. Because sometimes we think, oh, these are just random thoughts. It's like, no, that might actually be your intuition saying, come on, get out there. Like that invitation that just came in your email, like that's for you. Like you got that for a reason. Now follow that. If you think that lights me up, that's something that feels good to me. So for me, that's following your intuition. Yeah, and I'm also pulling this one back full circle. So I feel like it's funny because I think sometimes we have to train our minds in a different way when you're used to being told, like, so use an example again of a corporate job, you're used to being told this is what you need to do, and then you go do it. But when you are following your own rules, doing things on your own terms, it's different, right? So you get to make those decisions. So what is that for you? And it's a practice sometimes that you have to learn in building that intuition. Like, what do I want? And we can be so out of touch with what that even feels like. So I feel like it's still a muscle that I'm leaning into, that I'm building, but the more that I do it, and then you see the results of, yes, this was the right decision. And I felt it and I knew it. But it's okay to make mistakes too, and not listen and go, okay, that didn't feel good when I didn't listen, so I'm going to listen next time this comes around. Yeah. So, it goes back to trust, like going back, trusting, like this is what I know feels right, even though it's not always logical, or it's not maybe what a mentor told me to do, right? So even questioning, like, does this feel right for me?
Yeah. That's one of the things I loved so much about you and our work together. It was like, I really like working with people like you that will like be like, I don't know, like, is that that I should like take in? But that's great because that's always my intention is like, if something that I say doesn't resonate, then like there's wisdom there. So like no matter like what I'm, saying and like guiding people towards, like there's always some sort of wisdom that can be pulled as long as we remember like that you are in charge of like your own intuition and trusting yourself. So I think that's so important because I know there's been many times that I have totally gotten wrapped up in mentors and what they've said to me, and it has not worked. Like for example, like when I first met Ben, my sweetie pie, for those of you who don't know, I was just coming off of letting go of doing relationship coaching, ironically. And I was, people were asking me for business coaching, and that was starting to feel really good. And then I met Ben, and he's a videographer. So it was all starting to click. And my coach at the time was like, I really think that you need to like go hardcore into the relationship stuff because that's like what's come into your life. And I tried it and it didn't work. And I was like, so like, I should have listened to myself because I put a ton of energy into doing that, and I think there's so many people that they ignore, that higher wisdom within ourselves and just do it because they feel like they should, because somebody who looks like they're more successful, told them to. And we need that guidance. We totally do. And at the time, like, reflecting back to ourselves. So
yeah, and sometimes that guidance, like I always say I don't have regrets in decisions that I make. Like I don't think it's helpful to have regrets. I think it's good to learn, like, what's the lesson? What would I do differently? And sometimes things show up in life, or we make certain decisions that end up showing us that we want something different. And we wouldn't have known that we wanted the opposite, or we wanted something different, or if that didn't work for us, we wouldn't have known if that thing hadn't come up in our life to begin with, right? So this is what I tell a lot of the women that I work with, is knowing what doesn't work for you is incredibly powerful also.
Totally. Yeah. Right. And I think sometimes like in spirituality world, it's like, oh no, I don't want to like, only focus on what I want. Like, don't pay attention to all this other stuff here. But it's like bringing it back full circle to what we were talking about, like the darkness and the light. It's like, they're both important to know. Yes, like set your sights on like what you want, but like don't forget that the things that you're not willing to buy into. So important. Somebody actually just asked me that as Ben and I are like, really kind of like planning our future life. And they're like, well, what don't you want? And I'm like, oh. So this, I feel like you're also saying that for me right now. Like, yeah, like I don't know. Like, and now it's like all complicated because there's like two of us, So I feel called to ask you, and I don't know why, but it just keeps popping back in my head, maybe related, maybe not to what we're talking about right now. But I would love you to talk a little bit about your first group program and like, how did you know that it was time to do that? What was that experience like? Because I think a lot of people really hold themselves back from doing something like a group program when they know that they were meant to lead, in some aspect groups and to create that kind of a dynamic, but it feels super scary because it's like, oh my God, what if I just get one person in and then it's not a group program. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about your experience around that, because I know that was a really kind of amazing birthing that you created while we were working together.
Yeah, it really was. And I'm so glad I did it. I learned so many great things about myself and the work that I'm here to do. It took me a while. It took me a while to build up to actually taking the leap to do it. So I was in a group coaching program, and a big part of that was like training us to do our own group programs. And so I knew that for a while, this is something that I wanted to do. And just like with anything new, sometimes we make it into be this like big, scary, complicated thing. And we think, well, what if I'm not capable of pulling it together? Whether that's like not getting enough people in the program, or what in the heck am I going to teach? Like, what am I going to say? ends up getting into like this overwhelm phase of like, how do I even do this? And that's mostly just because it's new. We haven't done it before. And so I stayed there for a little while before I actually got to launching the group program. And I'm really good when I have a deadline and a fire lit under me. And that fire became, okay, my mentoring program, the one that I'm in with a coach, is going to be ending. And this is something that you committed to doing. So are we going to do it or not? And so it's like, okay, we're going to do this. That was the fire lit under me. And so I started putting it together, and the content just flowed right through me. Like, that was a no-brainer once I got that started, and you helped me come up with an amazing title for that program. And I just started reaching out to people and inviting them to join. It's like, hey, this is my beta group, which took the pressure off of me, because it was setting the expectation of, hey, this is the first time I'm doing it, and I'm going to want your feedback, and I'd love your participation, and you'll have an incentive to be part of this beta group. And I found a way to take that pressure off of me so that it could be more fun. Like, I need it to be fun. This needs to be like a playground for me, and it needs to be something that lights me up. And so I found that way for myself. And once I did, it just, as you saw, like, it was just happening. It was just coming together. And like, friends that were on my list were like, hey, I think I want to do this. And I hadn't even considered like personally inviting them. I didn't think like, oh, they'd want to jump in. And they're like, oh yeah, I want to do this. Like, oh, this is awesome. So I ended up pulling together a group of 6 women, and it was just perfect. Like, the way, the dynamic of the group, the way it came together, it just was this perfect synergy. And they've really appreciated that I was open to feedback too, that I wanted to hear what they had to say and what they wanted and what they needed. And I just got such great positive feedback, and to watch it unfold as I watched these women bond with each other, it was just like, wow, I created this, but like, it wasn't about me. It was just about me holding the space for it to happen. And that's what my job was, to like be able to hold the space and step into my leadership and let it happen. So this was like, the test for me was after each call. I was doing these in the evenings, and because women are working during the day in their jobs, and after each call, I was totally energized. Like, I would just be beaming and lit up, and like, I actually had to like work to like get myself to, get into more chill and like ready for bedtime. Yeah. So I had to like unwind myself, because I'd be so wound up and like just lit up from doing these calls. And that's when I was like, okay, this is what I'm here to do. This is part of what lights me up. And I never would have known that had I not taken that scary leap just to do it, just to get out of my own way and just do it. So, and now the women that have been part of that program, they're like, we want more. Like, what's the next level? And so that's been incredible to see that unfold also.
I love that. And so what would you say, like, were kind of some of your biggest lessons that you would encourage other women to take into account if they're wanting to launch their own groups?
Have a mentor. I would say, for sure, it helps to have someone like holding your hand, whether that's through like a buddy that's done it before, or a mentor that you're paying to work with. Like, it's so much harder to do it on your own. So having that support is super helpful. And then just believing that if you feel called to do it, if it's not a should, right? Getting out of that, like, I feel like I should do this. If you're in the territory of, no, I'm feeling called to do this, even though it's terrifying me, to follow that, like, to just be afraid and just take that next step anyway. Like, what's the next thing that I need to do? And how can I make it fun? How can I make this a more fun thing for me? Because if it starts to feel like an arduous path or something that you start to resent, then that's not going to work for anybody, right? That's not going to be in alignment. So just knowing that being afraid can mean that you're just excited too, because something amazing is about to happen.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Yeah, the being afraid. I totally feel like fear you know, at least in a sense of most things related to business, is like a really good thing, you know, like fear coupled with like the dreaming into like, oh my God, if this happens, like that would be so amazing, right? Like fear, and then you're like sick to your stomach, like, ugh, it feels so heavy to like, you know,
Yeah.
do this thing. Like not necessarily looking at the work, because the work is always going to be heavy. Like you can add in those fun parts, which I think like is what you're talking about, right? And I know we came back to that over and over again. I'm like, Shannon, how can you make this fun? How can you make this fun?
Yeah.
And I know that's one of like my zones of genius is like, okay, like let's just lighten it up and like, you know, add some like unique Shannon juice to it, and then it'll be like so much less painful, right?
Yeah, you were so good at reminding me of that. Like, oh yeah, I'm creating this. So what do I want to create? Like I get to bring in like this fun spiritual parts, or like what's going to be fun for me, and feeling like it has to look a certain way because someone else did it that way. Like, what's your way of doing it?
Yeah. Right. What's your way? And there are like, you know, certain proven things for sure. And yet, like, how can we add our own unique flair to it? And that is where I think like the alignment that you kept, you know, referring to earlier comes in. It's like, yes, and like, how can we like infuse it with the like juiciness that you are, you know, or the boldness that you are, or all those different like pieces. Yeah. So I guess I'd love to ask you that too. Like, you know, we're kind of like coming to a close. Like, how are you infusing even more of who you are, all these different layers, like into the next level of what's next for you?
How am I doing that? So a big part of that, I think this is how, you know, I was sharing with you earlier, you know, in preparation for doing this video call with you. It's learning for me, this is part of my spirituality, is believing in like being a channel for what needs to come through me. So whatever messages are meant to come through, like not what I'm coming up with my, you know, like in my brain, my logic, but what is it that needs to come through me? Like what needs to be heard? What's that voice that needs to come out into the world? So really leaning into that, because what I've found is like, for example, I'll be on a call with a client and I'll say something that might even seem a little edgy, and I don't realize like it's coming out of my mouth until it's out, and I'm like, ooh, where did that come from? Like that was a little edgy. I think that was actually just meant to come through. This is what that person needed to hear. And then I'll see how it lands with them, and they're like, yeah, like you're absolutely right. Or it resonates with them in some sort of profound way. Whether or not they respond, right? I think that's not my business. They might, you know, quietly take that and then consider it later. And that's okay too. But it's just about trusting that what comes through me is what needs to be heard. So the more that I do that, actually the easier it is, because we can spin ourselves crazy trying to come up with this logic, or what we think is going to land well, or what we think needs to be heard, or what kind of like from a, you know, like if you look at it from like an ego perspective, people talk about coming from the ego. When it comes from a place of more just like that inner knowing and that allowing, it's actually so much easier, you know, and it feels better, right? Because then you just it comes through, and then you just trust.
I love that. And I loved how you said that before we hopped on, as like just being that channel for what wants to come through. I know, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but one of my favorite prayers is speak to me and through me, speak to me and through me. And actually, it's such a good one. I actually learned that back when I first discovered A Course in Miracles, and I was going to like a meetup, and the person who led the meetup, the leader of the meetup, she would say that, like, right, or maybe she just referenced that she said that, and I've grasped onto that. You know how there's like certain things that you just like hold on to and never leave you. Like I remember that moment, and like it's so powerful. Like anytime I get on an interview or a video that I do, or especially client like consultations or discovery calls, I feel like that's really important for me to say before I hop on those. So
yeah,
that.
So good.
Yeah. Well, anything else that you just like love to leave everyone with, like, nuggets of wisdom or Shannonisms or anything that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, just one of my favorite sayings is give yourself permission. So that so much of the work that I do, or when in my writing, or when I'm giving workshops, is that is the core of what I see with women, is giving themselves permission to have what they want, permission to be who they are, permission to find their voice. When you need that reminder and you're feeling stuck or scared or just not sure what to do next, like, just give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to have whatever that thing is. Because usually we know what that thing is. We're just not giving ourselves permission to have it.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how you do that work with women. And I have such a soft spot for you, not only because I know you and love you and have been like fingers in your business, but just who you are. I really encourage everyone to connect with you further, especially if they're a woman who's feeling unfulfilled in their line of work, no matter what that work is. You just have such wisdom bringing them back to their truth and their desires, creating an action plan to actually like go and get it, what they really want.
Yeah. So. Thank you. And I'm grateful to have had you along that path and like really finding my voice and like letting that authenticity shine through. So yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been such a pleasure. So where's your favorite place to connect with people? Or would you like people to find you? We'll put all your links in the show notes, which will be over at jesstomlinson.com/show-6. For people that want to find out more about you and read your bio and click on the links. But what's your favorite place for people to find you?
Yeah, so people can find me at my website at Shannon-Ray, that's REY.com. And you can connect with me there. You can request to schedule some time with me to do a consultation and talk about, what your goals are and your dreams and your challenges and how we can help you move forward in your career.
Yay. And apparently one of your doggies, or both of them, really like that.
I think that, that's a big resonant, like, yes. It's actually UPS just showed up and he's super excited because we have a package.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, for sharing, for this conversation. It's felt super fun and I'm so grateful.
Yes, so much fun. Thank you. It's been an honor to be on the show with you. And I love our juicy conversations are always so great. So thank you.
You're welcome.